This here is the 2025 SHIMANO SOARE XR. And I will explain in a few minutes what exactly this reel is, what is good and what is bad in it. But first, let me just spin it around so you guys can take a good look, because the pictures that Shimano posted on their website were kind of misleading. The pictures on the website had the spool and even the frame here looking kind of chromy, which was very scary because at the age of 47, I can no longer tolerate chrome. I can barely look at the ugly looking reel. However, in person, there is no chrome in the reel. The spool color, you can tell, okay, it's not as good looking as the previous Soare XR. I'll show you that in a second. But there is no chrome. It's just, even it's kind of darkened, the spool. I myself have no problem looking at this reel on any of my Japanese rods, anything like Yamaga blanks or Major Craft. Actually, the Soare XR rod will tolerate this reel very well. But yeah, it does not come even close to the looks of the prior generation. The prior generation was a gorgeous looking reel. I mean, this was a collector's item. Look at this. Can you compare this to this? First of all, what happened with the legacy color scheme, the accents? Where did they go? From here to here? I don't know. Aesthetics is a serious downgrade for sure. That said, I will repeat, we dodged a bullet. At least there is no chrome. Now, let's explain what exactly is this reel. Even though if you have followed my channel for a while, there will be no surprises for you here. If I remove the spool of this reel quickly, here it goes. And if I also remove the handle of the reel, what is left in my hands now is 100%, not 99, not different shims or anything, is 100% the 2024 Vanford. That was the case with the prior generation. What this is here, if I remove the spool and the handle, we will be left again with exactly, this is the 2022 Soare XR, we will be left with the 2021 Vanford. So whatever few changes there are between the Soare XR and the Vanford of the same generation, they are all in the tiny handle and inside the spool. It's not even the spool itself. The spool itself has exactly the same geometry, but in the spool there is a couple of small and annoying differences, and let's go through them very quickly. As we already mentioned, the handle is a clear improvement over the Vanford. It looks nicer, it doesn't have this joint here, and it is carbon instead of metal, so you also save a few grams. Now, people also point that you have a smaller knob here. However, I do not agree that this is an improvement over the stock knob of the Vanford. In my experience with this knob, because I think it's the same knob as on the Vanquish, if it's not the same, they're virtually identical. But in my experience, if I use the reel to twitch a 1 gram and you just barely touching it and stopping and going, then the shape of this knob does not bother me at all, and it doesn't all the time, distract me and focus my attention on the knob. But if I am going to use the reel to pull swim baits, so my fingers will be here all the time and I'm pulling a swim bait, let's say the 2.0 number 8 BG1, which is kind of heavy, then I just don't like this knob for that specific purpose. And as a matter of fact, this is what I'm going to be using this reel for. It will be swim bait or maybe even drop shot reel, and it will be kind of a, relatively speaking, power application. So in my case, this is the last time you are seeing this knob. I will replace it with the stock knob from the Vanford, because when I'm pulling swim baits, this is just a better grip. Maybe I'm old and that's what I'm used to, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's just a better contact for pulling swim baits. Again, for twitching tiny jigs, it doesn't bother me, but if I'm gonna be pulling swim baits, then the knob actually has to be replaced. The other two differences between a Vanford and a Soare XR are both inside the spool. This spool in the Soare XR runs on two bearings. One over here, it fits over here, but it's actually under these washers over here. You can see the metal rim, the metal race of the bearing. So this is the bearing that is under the spool, and on top of the spool, as you can see, there is another bearing. So the Soare XR has a bearing on top of the spool and under the spool. The Vanford out of the box comes with no bearings on the spool. Now you can add a bearing under the spool on the Vanford, because over here under all of these washers comes with a plastic bushing, and I already sell in my shop the bearing and it costs like $3 and it takes 2 minutes to replace. So in the Vanford we can put a bearing under the spool, but there is no place to put a bearing on top of the spool like you see over here, because there is no bushing here in the Vanford spool that can be, removed and replaced. What you see here as a bearing in the Vanford spool is actually a part of the metal housing of the spool. Now, what is more important than the difference in bearings is the question, does that make any noticeable difference? Now, I'm sure if you put it on some machine that can detect the smallest force, yeah, a machine with AI in it can probably detect the difference, but I have fished with ultralight reels a long time now, and I can tell you that in a blind test, cannot tell you if my reel has 2 bearings or 0 bearings in the spool. To give you one example that will put an end to this whole bearings on the spool question, the Shimano Sahara, a $60 reel of any generation, this generation or the prior generation, has a better, smoother, more consistent drag than any version of the Vanford of this generation or the prior generation. Think about that. The Sahara has 0 bearings anywhere, but it has a larger felt disc. And the larger felt disc smooths out all imperfections. It prevents all surging. It just makes everything more consistent. And this here is the last difference between a Soare XR and a Vanford. In the Soare XR, you get a carbon disc, the exact one you see in my hands over here. I'm showing you two because this one is from the old Soare XR, this one is from the new Soare XR. I cannot tolerate these things. I remove them immediately. And the Vanford out of the box comes with a beautiful, smooth, perfect felt. All of the YouTube experts will tell you that carbon is an upgrade to felt. I'm here to argue with anyone in Shimano, in Daiwa, or anybody at all, that as far as ultralight fishing goes, carbon is absolute shit. And there is no grease, there is no reel, there is nothing, there is no mechanism that can make carbon perform good in ultralight reels. You are always going to have surging drag. It's gonna sound like zzz. Then the fish pulls, it doesn't let go, and then all of a sudden zzz. It's just surging, nothing, and then it goes zzz. It's absolutely maddening performance. Surging, then sticking, then surging again. It's absolutely unbearable. Carbon drag in any ultralight reel will ruin completely your fishing experience, and there is no grease that can help you fix this. The best grease in the world, by the way, to reduce the surging that comes out of these carbon discs is the anti-surge drag grease, and I will put a link to that drag grease in the description. And if you can't afford to replace the carbon with felt, in that case I do recommend trying the anti-surge grease. It will reduce the surging up to a threshold, but when it hits a very high level of force, even the anti-surge grease will not completely eliminate the surging. The only way to eliminate the surging is to replace the carbon with felt. What felt? Where to find the felt? Just buy the felt for the Vanfords, of course. It will fit here perfectly. Okay, there is one last thing I need to show you in the spool. Even though this is not a difference of Soare XR versus Vanford, it is the same in both reels. But after I made so much noise about it, I was just secretly hoping that Shimano would fix this in the more expensive versions of the Vanford, but they didn't. Now, this hammer over here, let's see how to do this so you guys can see it. It rides on the teeth of the plastic cog. The cog pushes it, then lets it go, and the hammer hits this plate over here. I think you guys can see it, okay? And this is what makes the tuck, 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 tuck sound in your drag. Now, in the prior generation of the Soare XR, the hammer was hitting directly the metal spool. And because of that, it was making a beautiful metallic sound. This reel sings. It sings like a little bird with a metal throat. It absolutely sings. But in this generation of Vanford, in all versions of the Vanford, Shimano, in their infinite wisdom, decided to mount the hammer on a plastic plate, this plastic plate here. So now, when the hammer is released, it hits a plastic plate. And there goes your beautiful metallic sound. Yeah. This is your sound now. The metal hammer is now hitting on plastic. And there is nothing you can do to fix this. People keep replacing this plastic cogwheel with metal ones. This does nothing. This just lifts the hammer. This is not what the hammer hits. Don't spend your money buying the metal wheels. It will make your reel sound worse, actually. And you're gonna add 1 or 2 extra grams to your reel. Do not replace this plastic wheel here with metal. This is a very bad idea. Okay, so I showed you the differences between the Soare XR and the Vanford, but what is the difference between the new Soare XR and the old Soare XR? What is exactly different between these two reels? In the prior generation of Vanford reels, the reels from 2021 and 2022, Shimano introduced for those reels the so-called micro module gears. I've shown this in several videos already and I'll show it on the screen here. But basically, the normal length of the teeth in this kind of Shimano reels used to be, let's say, 5 millimeters. I haven't measured them, but this is just a figure of speech, just so you can get the idea. But let's say that prior to this generation, each of the teeth used to be 5 millimeters long. Well, for this generation, Shimano decided to go to these micro module teeth, which instead of 5 millimeters long, were only 3 millimeters long. Okay, so they were almost half as short as the old teeth. And back then, Shimano hailed it as some kind of revolution, all kinds of savings, of resistance and whatnot, and big revolution. But only 3 years later, they decided that the small teeth were actually a mistake. To hell with the small teeth, we are going back to our old teeth that were 5 millimeters. So all of these revolutions that Shimano's marketing team is making up, from one revolution to the next revolution, all they did was actually make a humiliating return, a humiliating U-turn, and pull the micro module teeth out of the market and put back the old teeth. If you want more detail about that, you can watch my 2024 Vanfords review, because over there I talked about the teeth in a lot more detail, and there are some, trade-offs there. It's not just a win-win. Maybe durability is a win, but now the new teeth have a little bit more resistance. And was durability a problem for the ultralight reels in the first place? For me, and I'm gonna end the gears issue like this, for me, as far as ultralight reels go, these new or old reels is just a tiny trade-off for another tiny trade-off, but overall, the new teeth are not really better than the old teeth, again, only as far as ultralight reels. If you're talking about larger reels for carp fishing or saltwater fishing, there I can concede that the new gears will prove to be more durable, but in ultralight reels, I don't think so. What matters to the end user is that the new Soare XR does not have less resistance and is not smoother than the old one. What else do I care? It doesn't have less resistance, it actually has a little bit more resistance. And it's not any smoother, because the surface of the teeth is the same. There is one last thing I have to show you before I close this video though, because it is the most important asset of this reel. And that is the 4.4 gear ratio. The Vanfords, sadly, just don't come in 4.4 gear ratio. And this 4.4 gear ratio is so amazing for ultralight fishing, both for twitching and for pulling swim baits, that for me, folks, the biggest reason that makes it worth it buy the Soare XR over the Vanford is just so you can get a 4.4 gear ratio to pull your swim baits with, to pull your, spinners or whatever lures you have that create a lot of resistance through the water, and you don't want to pull them with a 5 gear ratio. Because this reel, I already fished it, this reel is amazing for doing that. It pulls those heavy swim baits like nothing. The gear ratio, my friends, is the biggest asset of this reel.